Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Today is Season 6, Episode 12. We're talking about Edge. After Edge, we only have one more episode, and that's going to be Interior Defensive Line. One more pre-draft episode scheduled, that is. We are looking to do one more on Wednesday that should go up Thursday morning, if not late Wednesday night, so look out for that. We'll probably do a Mod Podge of prospects, so one more of those, so look out for that. But we're talking about Edge today, and behind TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith, there's not a lot. You're looking at Edge as a position that you could possibly even double dip in, because there's just not a lot behind it. It's really a position you could take anywhere. I mean, it wouldn't probably be the best pick in the first round, but you can justify saying, hey, we really want edge depth just in case, so we're going to grab a guy in the first round if he's the best player available. I don't subscribe to that idea, but I'm just saying, I'm throwing it out as a possibility because the Steelers front office is going to do whatever the Steelers front office wants to do. If they want Najee Harris, they're taking Najee Harris. If they want Gregory Rousseau, they're going to take Gregory Rousseau. It doesn't really matter. That being said, I did not look at Gregory Rousseau today, but I do have 2-3-4 defensive ends, 2-3-4 outside linebackers to look at today. And the first one is going to be Rashad Weaver. You guys might be familiar with him because he's a 3-4 defensive end at Pitt. He is 6'4" and 259 pounds. And he was only a 3-star recruit coming out of Florida, but was still able to receive a bunch of offers from places like including Penn State, Michigan, Syracuse, and Illinois, but he decided on heading to Pittsburgh. As a redshirt freshman, he was able to play a solid amount with 28 tackles, 6 for a loss, 3 sacks, and 3 pass breakups. In 2018, he came on really strong, racking up 47 tackles, a massive 14 for a loss, 6.5 sacks, 4 pass breakups, and 2 forced fumbles. He's expected to have another huge season in 2019, but unfortunately suffered an ACL tear in the preseason that knocked him out for the year. He returned for 2020 and showed up big, though, earning first-team AP All-American and All-Conference recognition for his 35 tackles, 14.5 for a loss, 7.5 sacks, and 3 forced fumbles through only 9 starts. Following his senior season, he declared for the draft. So what's good about Weaver is he has good size with length to match. I mean, he stands at 6'4" and 259 pounds. He's actually pretty solid in that regard, and his wingspan is pretty good. He's just above average for an edge rusher in the size department. Then he's good at getting up his hand into passing lanes if he doesn't get to the quarterback in time. I will say, though, on the stat sheet, it doesn't look that impressive with his pass breakup repertoire. Sorry, I can't speak. But I will say, like, he makes it harder for the quarterback. It might not show up in the stat sheet, but he is putting his hands into throwing lanes, and sometimes it works. Like, you look at the Miami game where he had 2 pass breakups in the first half against Derek King because he was just getting his hand up there and just trying to make a play, and it worked. So I was happy with that. I was happy with the stuff I couldn't see on the stat sheet. So I think that's good. It's a good practice to have to make throws harder. Then he's an adequate block shedder, flashes of great block shedding ability in games like Miami's. He wasn't always consistent with it. It wasn't like always amazing, but there's flashes of some really good block shedding abilities coming from him. Then he played with good patience against Miami, an offense that's similar to Baltimore's. Derek King is a guy that I feel like I'm going to look at in a year or two whenever he comes out, because I don't know exactly what year he's in, but I'm fairly confident I'm going to call him Lamar Jackson. That's really what he looks like. I mean, in the tape I watched, I mean, looks like an inaccurate passer with really good rushing ability, so uh, keep that in mind for later whenever Derek King comes out. Who knows? I mean, maybe next year he'll have an amazing year. But that's besides the point. I think that the offense is somewhat similar to Baltimore's because of that. And I mean, that's who you're really scheming against going against Baltimore's Lamar Jackson. So, played on both sides of the line. I'm going to just stop saying it because all my guys did that. I thought one of them wasn't going to, but he eventually had tape. But yeah, Weaver was moved on the left and right side. It did not matter. Then I thought he did a solid job setting the edge. I thought he did a decent job at that, not letting things bounce to the outside and get around him too much. I think he was good in that department. Then tight ends couldn't handle him one-on-one. It's kind of expected. I don't know why teams still try to put just a single tight end on a edge rusher by themselves. Usually they're too big and too strong and better hand fighters, so it did not work against Weaver, as you'd probably expect. Then he's fast off the snap. I thought Weaver had really good snap to attack speed, and I was happy with that. Then I thought that there was consistent effort from him, whether they were in a tight game, losing by 30 or up by 30. And I saw all of those. I saw every single one of those. Maybe not really tight games, but I mean, at some point the games were tight. But regardless, going to the negative side of things, he was an inconsistent run defender. I felt like he wasn't always giving his best effort there, in that department, but that was consistent, that it was inconsistent. Then he is below average play speed. I felt like he was kind of slow. Like watching him was a little bit lackadaisical, and he didn't really run the best 40-yard time. It was just it was considered okay. I mean, it wasn't terrible. He ran a 4.78 if I'm not mistaken, or a 4.88, one of those two, or watch it be neither. I'll get that up in a second as I'm talking, but realistically, he's just not that fast. Like it just didn't look good on. He ran a 4.88. Okay, yeah, and that got an RAS of 5.17, which literally puts him at basically just average, just like slightly above average, but really average. So wasn't terrible, but his play speed did look pretty slow. Then he was bad at recognizing screens. They ran two to his side in the Virginia Tech game, and both he didn't realize. He didn't do a very good job there. He still got his hands up for the throw, so again, going back to his positives, getting his hands into pass lanes, he made it tougher, but both of them still got completed, and he just didn't recognize what was happening, so not very good. Then speaking of Virginia Tech, he played against Darashaw's backup, which I was really looking. I didn't realize that Darashaw wasn't playing. I was really looking forward to seeing how he handled their starting tackle. That's considered like a first rounder by some, early second rounders by others, and I wanted him to do more because of it, because he was playing against the backup, and he didn't. I thought that his Virginia Tech game wasn't that good. I wasn't like it wasn't terrible. It was just kind of okay, like meh, like meh. I wanted him to see more, and like he didn't really work off that backup. I mean, I think I said this on the last episode, but that backup could be like the greatest player of all time for Virginia Tech, and he could have just been really good, but I still want you to take advantage when the best player's not in, or what the team says is the best player. But then I felt like Weaver came off the field a lot. Honestly, I really felt like for an edge rushers are rotated a lot. When watching all the tape, a lot of my edge rushers were rotated, but he was off the field for a good amount of time. Then he didn't really show any tools other than a spin move on one play. He didn't really look like he had like a swim move or anything like that. Like I wasn't really getting any toolsy from him. And it would be nice if he could get one. I think it would help him a lot in his game to be able to have a signature move that he could learn and use to his disposal. I think he'd have much better time with that. Then he slipped off tackles a bunch. I wasn't very happy with that. I thought that his tackling wasn't great at times. I felt like at the best it was probably adequate, but I feel like it was like slightly below average. Speaking of slightly below average, his strength was below average. I felt like he wasn't that good in that department. Then he stat padded against Clemson. When they were already down by 35 points before the second quarter was over, neither sack he had was overly impressive. Both were the you could honestly mirror them, and they looked exactly the same. He rode the guy up the circle around the pocket, and then just was able to close in on Trevor Lawrence that way. But it wasn't like impressive. It wasn't fast. He didn't push the tackle out of the way on a bull rush or anything like that. It was just he rode up the thing. Trevor Lawrence just didn't move really, and he was able to finally get to him. And again, it was at the point they were already down by 35 points, so it was more of just the offensive tackle just not having very good lateral movement to react to Weaver's quicker burst off the snap. Then I felt like Weaver was a little bit too patient on option plays. I think that's because he struggled to find the ball. That's what I kind of give it to. One of my other prospects has that problem, and you could tell he just can't find the ball. But I don't know if Weaver was just scared of like De'Aaron King just running, because again, when I say De'Aaron King, it reminds me of Lamar Jackson from the little I've watched. It reminds me exactly of Lamar Jackson, where he's scary with the ball in his hands when he's running. But yeah, I don't know if it's just he couldn't locate it or not, or he was just being extra cautious. But I felt like at times he was too patient. He needs to get there, and he could have made even more plays. I mean, he had a lot of tackles for a loss in his career, but he could have made even more. So most mocks have settled on Weaver being a late third rounder to early fourth rounder, but I'm still in the camp of late fourth rounder, early fifth rounder still. From the tape, I wasn't overly impressed. Granted, two of the games I watched were blowout losses, but even the tape against Virginia Tech, where it was a blowout win, I was left feeling just meh. Like I said, meh. That's kind of like the overall how I feel about him is just meh. I didn't think his tape was bad, don't get me wrong, and I think his size and length will be desired, but I'm just not sold on him being a third rounder with the negatives he has personally. Now, here's the one caveat I'll put to this, or the asterisk, whatever you want to call it. This is a very, 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 did I say very? Very weak edge class. Like, it is ridiculous. Like, the guys that are people being stretched into first rounders, one of them is Jason Awa. I think that's how you say his name. I don't really know. And he didn't have a single sack last season. And I mean, granted, sacks aren't everything. But it's just, that to me is wild that like a guy like that is being considered in the first round. I mean, the reason he's being considered is that he's a freaky athlete that ran like a 4.3 as an edge rusher. So there are reasons, but my point is, as a whole, the edge rush class is like confusing and not very good. Where the first edge rusher might not be off the board to like pick 20, and it's like Aziz Ajuari. I don't even know how to say that man's name honestly. I only saw it Aziz Ajulari. I think that's how you say it. I hope I didn't butcher that too bad. But yeah, like there's just not a lot of edge rushers. I mean, I think I'm forgetting about Kwity Paye. Kwity Paye is expected to go a little bit higher, and he's kind of like a good one, but just not a lot of good ones. And like guys like Gregory Rousseau, who I mentioned earlier in this podcast, are just like people don't even know where they're gonna go because he opted out and stuff like that. But regardless, my point being to get back to Weaver and why I said this is that I think edge rushers that aren't as good are being moved up a little bit this year because they're few and far between. And so if you need an edge rusher, you might have to pay up a little bit this year. And so guys like Weaver, where I felt like he might be a round too early on his grading for other people, might not be really too early for this year, if that makes sense. Like that in a year where you're desperate for an edge rusher, he might gain value. Anyway, to gather my opinion on him, I watched his highlights. I watched him versus Miami in 2020. I watched the Pittsburgh defense versus Notre Dame offense in 2020. I watched the Pittsburgh defense versus Virginia Tech in 2020, and I watched the Pittsburgh D versus Clemson in 2020. That being said, my next prospect is Dalen Hayes. He's 3'4". He's I just said 3'4". Sorry, he's a 3'4" outside linebacker from Notre Dame, and he's 6'3" and 253 pounds. Surprisingly, not 3'4". He was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school in Michigan and received offers from more than 24 different schools, including Alabama, Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, and USC. But he decided to play for Notre Dame. As a true freshman, he received some immediate playing time, playing all 12 of the team's games, and got 11 tackles and a pass breakup. In 2017, he was able to become a starter for 12 of the 13 games played and put up 30 tackles, 6.5 loss, 3 and 3 sacks. In 2018, he fell back into a backup role, with Julian Aquera becoming the starter, but Hayes was still productive with 31 tackles, 5 for a loss, and 2 sacks. In 2019, he played in the team's first 4 games, but a shoulder injury knocked him out for the rest of the year. Still, he put up 6 tackles, half of them being for a loss and a sack. In 2020, he was named a team captain and received honorable mention All-ACC recognition after starting 12 games and making 17 tackles, 6 for a loss, 3 sacks, an interception, and 2 forced fumbles. Following his senior season, he declared for the draft. So, what's good about him is he has solid coverage abilities, especially against running backs out of the backfield. I felt like he did a good job of covering. I mean, as an edge rusher, you're not expected to cover as much. You're just kind of you're really edge rushing. That's your whole job. But in Pittsburgh, we know how important it is for guys like that to still be able to cover. Like T.J. Watt even gets put into coverage at times. So I like that he was one of the better guys at covering, and I actually got to see that on tape. Then he also played on both sides. I know I said I wasn't going to say it, but I'll try to remember for the next one. Then I thought he had a good bull rush. I was kind of surprised by that. That he was so strong in that regard, where he was able to kind of push guys back and cause pressure that way. Pressure is underrated. because it's not a stat that's exactly tracked for most people. I mean, PFF tracks kind of pressure rates, but I felt like he's got good pressure that way. Then he has good snap to rush speed. I felt like he was quick off the snap, attacking. No complaints there. Then I liked how he was a hand fighter. I thought that his hand fighting abilities were adequate to probably a little bit above adequate. I thought that he could handle himself well in that regard, and he used it to get around guys a bunch on tape. I was happy with his strength. He put up 26 on the bench press. So again, I mean, you could pretty much tell why he was able to bull rush people when he was bench pressing 26 like that. And I thought that he had a strong base to match. And it's not at the sacrifice of speed either. That strength doesn't take away his speed. He has good initial quickness, so sometimes beat guys inside, and just he has overall solid speed. He ran a 4.71 on his 40-yard dash, which is in the top 86 percentile of edge rushers. So I was pretty happy with that. Then going to the negative side of things, he was another guy that was rotated off the field a bunch, and I mean this was really bad. He may have been on the field for maybe 6 minutes of the 11 minutes of defense against Clemson in the ACC championship game, and maybe 4.5 of the 9 minutes against Alabama. He was not on the field much. He was not. He was used very sparingly. He was a rotational player in college, and that's always going to. Excuse me. That's always going to be a concern. If you're not a main showpiece, which throughout his college career he really wasn't. He got put in a backup role in one of his earlier seasons after cracking the starting role the year before. So when they got someone better, they benched him. But I mean, I guess he got to start back in 2020. But the point still stands. I mean, he starting is in quotations, really. I mean, when he plays that little, yeah, you were on the field for the first snap, maybe, but just I wouldn't consider him a starter. He's mostly a rotational player still. Then he needs better block shedding abilities. He wasn't very good at getting off blocks. Offensive linemen gave him troubles in that regard, where he just kind of really couldn't get in there, and it kind of made him not as good against the run. And then he struggled mightily to do anything against Alabama's superpowered offensive line. I mean, that's kind of expected. Alabama is the best offensive line in the country. But, I mean, like, he was shut down completely. He was non-factor. He didn't do anything in that entire game. It was one of the most boring games I had to sit through and watch because I just got to watch my prospect get destroyed every single snap that he was on the field. Well, basically, but my excitement was trying to find him on the field where he was. Then he needs to do a better job of securing his target when tackling. He also had some guys slip him on tape, so that was not good as well. So overall, most mocks have him going in round 4 or round 5, with a few people giving him a 3rd round grade and a couple others giving him a 6. I personally am in the camp of late 6th to early 7th, but maybe it's because it's a weak edge class, again, that people have him going so early, but there literally just isn't enough tape to go off of. He didn't play much at all and didn't have amazing production when he was playing, so I personally don't like him anything above the 6th round. I think he could be a solid developmental pick with his athleticism, and he showed some good stuff on tape in the little tape I did see, but not enough to get me to the 4th or 5th round grade some are giving him. And I mean, it's really just like Dalen Hayes didn't play that much. It's not like there was YouTube videos for Notre Dame, like all their defense and stuff, and there was actually stuff to watch on him. So my sources were the Senior Bowl highlights he had. I watched versus Georgia in 2019. I watched versus Boston College in 2020. I watched the Clemson offense versus the Notre Dame defense in the championship in 2020. The ACC championship, I'm sorry. And then I watched the Notre Dame defense versus Alabama offense in the Rose Bowl. So there's tons of tape, and I could have watched more, but Hayes is just not getting on the field as much as like I want. I can't sit there all day looking for a guy that's like not even playing half his team's defensive snaps or barely is. So I don't know. I personally think he's being overrated a little bit, and I think a little bit too much compared to, what others are saying. Anyhow, that brings me to my next prospect, and that's Janarius Robinson, and he is not 3'4". He's a 3'4" outside linebacker from FSU who is 6'4" and 266 pounds. Robinson was a top 10 defensive end in the nation coming out of high school in Florida, being named a first-team All-State pick as a senior. He tagged on with his home state team, FSU, and saw little playing time as a redshirt freshman, 4 tackles, 1.5 for a loss through 8 games. The next season, he got to start 8 of the team's 12 games, put up 27 tackles, 3 for a loss, and a sack. In 2019, he got even better, leading his teams in tackles for a loss with 9, having 48 total tackles and forced 2 fumbles. In 2020, he started all 9 games and led the team in sacks with 3, made 26 tackles, with 7 being for a loss. Following his senior season, he declared for the draft. So, the positive about him is he has great size for an edge rusher. Another guy that's 6'4", but I actually rounded down. I really wanted to point out that he was 6'4.5", which at that point you're typically supposed to round up and say he's 6'5". So he is bigger than Rashad Weaver, who's also 6'4". But I mean, again, really good height, and at 266 pounds, he's got pretty good size for an edge rusher. Then he has freakish long arms. I look at that was the first thing I noticed about him. It was how I was able to point him out on tape, honestly, because he has just such a long arm span, which is so nice. Then he has decent block shedding. I thought that he was really good at getting off blocks, and he has a high motor. He's going to chase down guys on the other side of the field. He wants to get involved in plays. And it doesn't matter if it's on his side. He's going to go there and play safety, take the angles to just make sure his guys are going to make the tackle. And if they don't, he's going to be out in front. I like that about him. I didn't really see that from my other prospects, but my last prospect, I guess. But regardless, I was happy with it. And that being said, he is really fast for a guy his size. He's good. He's got good play speed with a sub 4.7 40 time. That's really good. Then he played on both sides of the... I didn't remember to not mention that he was going to play on both sides of the field. Well, he does. And then he's essentially an every down player, and he definitely showed he could handle a full workload against UNC. He was one of the only guys... He definitely had the most snaps of all my guys today that I got to see on tape, and I think that's good. I mean, he's proved that he could probably be an every down linebacker at the NFL level, which my other prospects I can't say the same for. I don't know if they could handle full workload. Then he is great at finding the crease between blockers and attacking it. I felt like he was able to get through some holes and just find them and just kind of swim through just barely between the creases, and this is something that I noticed from that. He was so good at that, and offensive linemen had their arms wrapped around him and wrapped around his neck, and the refs definitely missed some holds against him. His tape was so frustrating to me. If I was Janoris Robinson, I don't know what he did to the refs, but they like hated him. When I say they missed like so many penalties, they missed so many penalties. I felt like every third play Janoris Robinson was being held, or something was, or an illegal play happened. I just didn't. I don't know what happened, but I want to say that they mostly had to hold Janoris Robinson, and I mean he didn't get calls for it, but he should have. Then he was used on more twists and pulls than my other prospects. He was a guy that kind of looped around. I think he's more versatile of the bunch I looked at today because of that. I think that he doesn't just have the ability to play on both sides. He could do like the twists and stuff. Then he's a rare athlete with a 9.33 relative athletic score with great showings in the broad jump, 10-yard split, and 20-yard split. He showed some good things as an athlete. I mean, that's pretty rare. I've taken the 9.33 as he's in the 93.3rd percentile of all edge rushers, and that's really good. I mean, that's some rare talent right there in the athletic department. Then he did not take it very kindly to be blocked by a tight end versus Miami. He straight up ran that man over. It was the only time I saw him on a one-on-one rep with a tight end, and he killed it. And that being said, that it wasn't Brevin Jordan. It was, I think the number was 81. I don't know who that is for Miami, and honestly, frankly, I don't care. He got ran over. As the negatives, he lost sight of the ball at times. Like in the UNC game, before the end of the half, where he didn't set the edge properly and gave up a touchdown. I thought that was like his biggest thing, is that he just couldn't find the ball. He's an aggressive player, but he just doesn't really know where he's going. It's kind of like the Hulk. Like that's what he reminds me of. He's just gonna throw his body around and kind of hope the ball is there, but he wasn't processing right. And that being said, he's slow to recognize on option plays. De'Aaron King absolutely destroyed him. They literally went after him because he just couldn't find the ball. Like De'Aaron King holding and passing up the ball like on option plays was just not good for him. then he's not experienced in coverage, and that kind of blew my mind. I mean, I was expecting him to be more of a coverage guy than any of my other guys because of his height and wingspan, and he just really wasn't. I was almost going to say he got no snaps as a coverage guy, but I mean, he did. I finally got to see like a couple on tape, literally like a handful. But he is not a coverage guy. That's something that's going to have to be taught to him if he were to come to Pittsburgh. Uh, then he has slow bursts off the snap. I thought that he was kind of slower than what his 40 time maybe showed, at least in the initial burst. Uh, I felt like that was just a bit slower. Then I don't know if this is a fair criticism, but he needed better form to tackle Javonte Williams. Most people needed most people did need better form to tackle Javonte Williams. He's hard to take down. Also, watching more Javonte Williams tape is just he's just so good. He's just so good. It's just disgusting how good he is as a pass catcher, as a blocker, and stuff like that. But regardless, back to Janorius Robinson. He did let guys slip his tackles too often. It wasn't just Javonte Williams, so he does need to get better as a tackler. Then I felt like he puts his back to the blocker too much in an attempt to make a full spin move, but like I felt like his spin move was so labored that like it's not useful. Like I feel like that's a tool that he needs to work on if he wants to continue doing it, but honestly, I would just throw it out because I felt like his spin move wasn't quick enough where he would end up with his back on the offensive tackle or the offensive lineman whoever was blocking him, and it just didn't work. So I was not a fan of that. Then he needs to fall on fumbles when in traffic. He had 6 on his mind against Pitt, and on a sideline fumble tried picking the ball up, and you know what that resulted in? Nothing. It resulted in Pittsburgh recovering the fumble and the drive continuing on. It could have been a game changer. You don't know. That might have changed all momentum. It was in the end zone. It was to start the game. I mean, if you get that fumble recovery, you don't know how the game goes. You might be able to score early. It might change how the game goes. I wasn't happy with it. I felt like it was a stupid idea to try and pick it up, and I felt like he should have known there that he should have been on. He had to get on the ball. Then he needs to use his hands more. He is so good at beating people as a hand fighter when he did use them, and he just wasn't consistently hand fighting, and I have no idea why. It's really a shame. Like every single time I watch him use his hands, I'm like, wow, this guy's a really good hand fighter, but it just didn't happen as much as I wanted it to. Then he plays with too much forward lean at times. He ended up on the ground too much for me. I felt like the forward lean was a little bit bad, and he's going to be taken advantage of at the next level as well. So overall, there really aren't that many mock drafts with him in it, with only 10 on the mock draft database. Which if you guys don't know the mock draft database, please Google it. It's great. Lets you look up players. Lets you see on a condensed version where guys are saying someone's going to go in mock drafts. It basically takes all mock drafts and tells you where people have them projected. Obviously, guys that are later don't get as many mock drafts because the most popular kind of mock draft is on first round mock draft. But regardless, there are people that do full mock drafts or till round 3 or something like that. So please check out mock draft database. I want to support them as much as possible. But the 10 being on there, I don't really know if that's a reflection of people not thinking he's going to be drafted or what, but from the 10 I saw, he's projected to go somewhere between the 3rd and 6th rounds, with 7 of the 10 having him going round 4 or earlier, and I agree. I give him a late 3rd round grade personally because I really liked what I saw. He really flashed at times, but with the length he possesses, I think he would be a great developmental piece for a team. Obviously, there's no coverage abilities there right now, so that's going to have to be taught, so it makes him a little bit raw. More on the raw side, but regardless, he's an edge rusher. First and foremost, he's an edge rusher. If you can't drop into coverage right now, that's not the biggest problem. As at the moment, he just seems like a guy that could be a rotational piece in his rookie year that you hope develops later. So honestly, it's not the biggest deal. If you think you're going to be in coverage, keep him off the field. For the moment, I mean, he might develop early on. He might be a fast learner. Who knows? It's not the only negative he has, which is why it's keeping him why I give him a 3rd round grade, but still. And then I just want to point out, though, that the other 3 mock drafts all have him going in round 6, and Lance Sirloin projects him as a 6th rounder as well. And if he falls there, I think that would be immense value. I really think that Robinson would be an ideal developmental piece for a team that's looking for an outside linebacker. So to gather my opinion, I watched his career highlights. I watched the FSUD versus the UNC offense in 2020. I watched the FSUD versus Miami offense in 2020, and I watched the FSUD versus Pittsburgh offense in 2020. And that leads me to my last prospect, and that is Marquis Spencer. He's a 3-4 defensive end. Then he is from Mississippi State. Wow, really stumbling on my words today. He's 6'3" and 301 pounds. He's a big, big boy. Then coming out of high school in Mississippi, Spencer was considered a 3-star recruit that ranked in the top 300 players nationally. As a true freshman, he was able to play in all 12 games as a linebacker with 17 tackles, 3 for a loss, and a sack. In the next years, was a reserve player as a defensive end with 19 tackles, 4.5 for a loss, and another sack. The following season, he played in 4 games as a defensive end and got 3 tackles before suffering an upper body injury that knocked him out for the season. In 2019, he came back strong, though, and started all 13 games, making 37 tackles, 6.5 for a loss, 2 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles. In 2020, he was off to a good start through 9 starts with 30 tackles, 8 for a loss, 3 sacks, and an interception, but suffered a season-ending injury in mid-December. That was a scary injury. It was against Auburn, and he actually wasn't moving he was immobilized, and I had to put a neck brace on him, but he's okay now, as far as I know. But going into the positives, he is surprisingly fast for a guy his size. He ran a faster 40 time than Rashad Weaver at over 40 pounds heavier. I have no idea. I had no idea how it was possible. I was looking at that and I was like, "What went on here? What shenanigans at his pro day? Who did he pay to time him?" But it's true. Like watching the tape, it's he's faster at 3. Like I thought I was maybe confused. It's like, okay, well he suffered an injury. Maybe he fell out of shape because he had to recover from the injury. But like, no, he came into the season in 2020 at 300 pounds. Like before he got injured, and he was playing at that weight. So I thought that was bizarre. And now, getting even more bizarre, he had more coverage experience than both Rashad Weaver and Janarius Robinson. What? Also, like, how is that? Like, I coming into this, there were so many expectations. It's like, well, this is essentially a defensive tackle. I don't really know why I'm looking at him as a defensive end. He was probably not going to play at the NFL level, but I learned so much, and I didn't know how to handle it. He really did have more coverage experience than those two guys, and it's like that doesn't really make sense at his weight. Like I mean I loved it. I thought it was amazing. Like but it just wasn't expected. Then as a bull rusher, he keeps his feet moving, which allows him to drive guys back at times. And now this is why he's able to do what he's able to do. He has foot quickness and agility that are really great. That is what allows him to move as fast as he does, and this is why he at such a high weight. It's just a really, really good foot quickness and agility. It's a very amazing trait that really is borderline elite. I'm gonna call it as it is. It's borderline elite. I mean, you don't move that fast as a guy that weight without really good foot quickness and agility and good foot movement. And it really gives him an edge in that regard. Then he doesn't give up on plays. He tries to get involved. He was a complete opposite player of what I was expecting. He is high effort guy that is going to move across the field. So going to the negatives, he got a 12 on the bench press at 301 pounds. So he is carrying unnecessary weight because it's obviously not muscle. I tried. I Googled. I was like, this man had to have like messed up or something. There was something that went wrong. Maybe got injured on the bench press or something. And I literally Googled it for like 20 minutes trying to find an article of someone talking about it. And like all the articles were like, he got asked questions like, do you feel like you did good at your bro day? And he said, yeah, I feel like I did good. And I'm like, so that, like, this wasn't a mistake. Like, this is just actually what it was. That is awful. That is really, really bad. Like, for an edge rusher, it's bad. If you're talking about a guy possibly going to defensive tackle, that is, like, in the bottom 1 percentile of all defensive tackles ever. And under that. So, that is ridiculously bad. He is out of shape by far and will likely not translate to a defensive tackle if he doesn't at least put on the strength. And really, like at the weight he's not set to be a defensive end really either. I mean, there's a few guys that play at that weight, but he's just not good. And then he needed better pursuit angles. I felt like as a player, like he was a high effort player, and I give him that, but he wasn't taking really good pursuit angles to get to the ball, and so he's just kind of wasting his energy, honestly. Then I thought he was a below average block shedder with very poor hand fighting abilities. I mean, he really wasn't good with his hands. I don't know what the deal was. I think he was relying completely on his size to overwhelm people, but he just wasn't really good at getting off blocks, and then just wasn't able to fight guys with his hands. So overall, Spencer's a guy that is mostly projected as undrafted, only showing up with a single mock on the mock draft database as going to the Packers in round 6. Honestly, I expected to hate him, and I was ready for a low effort, weak player, and that's not really what I got. I felt like on tape his play strength was adequate. Like I really didn't feel like it was that bad, and I think it might be again because his foot quickness and movement is so good that it made his bull rushes so much better. That it wasn't really that he was maybe strong, but it was just that he was good at driving his feet, and that made him better. And that being said, I give Spencer a 7th round grade because there's something interesting here. He may have to convert to a defensive tackle at the NFL level, but then he has to get strength. But I mean, Stephon Tuitt plays at over 300 and is a great defensive end on the other hand, so he may not have to. And he might be better suited for a defensive end. With that being said, I mean, if Tuitt's doing it at 300, why can't this guy? Why can't Marquis Spencer do it? So what really blew me away was the speed. A man at 300 pounds should not be able to move the way he does. I think there's a lot to develop here, and teams can choose the way they want to go, whether he stays at his weight and moves a defensive tackle or drops a little and stays at defensive end. I think that he is best not playing at 300. I know that I just said Tuitt does it. I think he's better off dropping a little bit, maybe to like the 285 area. I mean, that's a lot of weight to drop, if I'm being honest. It's 16 pounds, which, I mean, it sounds small, but it's a lot to lose, especially in one off season. But I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he does go late 6th round. If I'm being honest with you, his foot quickness and agility is, like I said, borderline elite. And when I was talking about Ian Book, right? Remember how I said what I look for in a late round prospect is something they're really good at. That's something that's NFL ready. For him, it's his foot quickness, and usually what I'm looking for is not elite or borderline elite. Usually, it's something that's just very good that I think could project well into the NFL level. This is something to work with. This is a trait where I'm like, wow, that's really good. And because it's like borderline elite, I think you could even fork over a 6th round pick. But this is a guy that I think should stick around on a practice squad for a little bit, and then we're gonna see how good he develops. I think that he would be a solid pick. So to develop my opinion on him, I watched his highlights. I watched versus Kansas State in 2019. I watched Mississippi State defense versus Texas A&M offense in 2020, and then I watched the Mississippi State defense versus Auburn in 2020, and that's where he actually got injured. But he didn't get injured till late in the 4th quarter, so I got to see a good amount of him. So that being said, it's time to rank my prospects. Should I do the top to bottom or bottom to top this time? Let's do bottom to... No, let's do top to bottom. So at number 1, my number 1 guy is going to be Janarius Robinson. I really like the developmental aspect of this. The Steelers don't really need an outside linebacker to start right now, so I think that he would be a solid pick, even if it's at the 3rd round. It wouldn't be the worst thing. I think you do need an edge rusher. I think as a guy that can probably come in, give T.J. Watt or give Alec Highsmith rest, I think Janarius Robinson would be like an immediate backup. So I got Janarius Robinson at number 1. Behind him, I actually have Marquis Spencer. I think that I didn't really hide it because I just like what he has. I think that this could be a guy that's a game changer. Honestly, I think it's a guy that's like, wow, this guy moving at 300 pounds is moving like that. I think that if he puts in the work to get stronger, I think he's going to lose weight by getting stronger, which is crazy because I think he's got unnecessary weight on him, and that's why he's at 301 pounds. But it doesn't have like the strength to match it. I think that he's going to lose lose some weight by putting on muscle, and then he's just going to be ridiculous. Like I think this is a great developmental pick, if I'm being honest with you. Then after him, I have Rashad Weaver. I'm not sold on Weaver. I think he's an okay pick. I think he's being overvalued a little bit, so I wouldn't love him at the value that other people have him at. But I wouldn't be super mad about it if the Steelers did go there with a third round, with their late third round. I'd like him a lot better in the fourth, really in the compensatory section, but I mean, it is what it is. But that leaves Dalen Hayes for last. I just can't. Like, he's a rotational player in college. I just can't expect him to do that much at the NFL level. I wasn't in love with his tape. I mean, there's some stuff to work with, and it's definitely like worth the risk, but not at where he's being projected. I mean, again, most mocks have him in round 4, round 5, but I don't see it. I'd rather take the chance with, like, if Weaver and him are both going in round 4, who I'm taking? I'm taking Weaver by far. But I just couldn't. I mean, if he's in the 6, I would mess with that. I like Dalen Hayes enough to take him in the 6, but I just don't like where his value is at right now compared to my other prospect. But that should wrap up today's podcast. It's been season 6, episode 12, and hopefully tomorrow or the next day I am back with the interior defensive line, which is the last group of prospects that we have to look at. And then we'll do a mock draft episode. Maybe get a few more prospects to look at. I have some guys I have my eyes on that I want to look at some more, but that'll be a tale for another day. Everybody, have a good night and go Steelers.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.